Earlier this year, we got an interesting leak from the Korean Games Board. According to this, Syphon Filter 1, 2, Dark Mirror, and Logan's Shadow were all rated for the PS4 and 5. Considering that Sony has largely ignored this series since the PSP days, it was nice to see some type of indication that in some form it would be coming back. Now, all this information was before Sony provided details on their new PS Plus service. For a while at this point, it was rumored that Sony would be having some form of backwards compatibility or provide means to play older titles from the PS1, PS2, PS3, and even the PSP. Sometime after this leaked, it was confirmed by Sony that their new tiered PS Plus program would now feature bundling in older titles for people to play them. So now it was only a matter of time till we would see them released on PSN. What I did like was how you had access to Syphon Filter through one of two ways. Either you could join the monthly program and have access to a library of titles including Syphon, or you could buy it outright. One welcome feature for the re-release was the ability to use save states and a rewind. The rewinding is really useful as it provides a nice option for new players especially to correct a wrong move. Outside of some issues with the joystick sensitivity on the PS5, I found it to be a good way to play this game, and this made it very accessible to new players to try it out. And now this brings us to Syphon Filter 2 and when it's going to be released on PSN. On August 31st, Ben's Twitter account made a nice surprise tweet saying that 2 would be coming in September. And as a big fan of this series, I thought it was only right that I made a video about Syphon. Before we discuss 2, I thought it would be a good opportunity to set the stage with Syphon Filter 1. From a development standpoint, the game marked a redemption for Eidetic. At the time, they released Bubsy 3D, which was a critical and financial failure for the studio. Sony was looking for studios to make games on their PS1, and Eidetic created a prototype to show what their engine could do, and this caught the eye of Sony. It was here where Syphon Filter began to take shape. Syphon Filter ended up being a critical and financial success, and very much acted as a redemption for the studio, and honestly truly showed what these talented developers could do. Many cite Metal Gear Solid, Tenchu, Hitman, Thief, and Splinter Cell when discussing older stealth games, and sadly Syphon Filter doesn't get brought up enough, but it was released oddly around the same time of many of those other titles, and carved out its own place within the stealth action genre. And after the success of the first, Gabe Logan was here to stay. Playing Syphon Filter 1 does look dated today, but I still love its visual style. But the gameplay and especially the design is where the game has aged like fine wine. The use of having a lock-on was very common for third-person shooters, and the use of the lock-on here has an enjoyable sweeping effect. When you lock on, the camera will swing around to your target, and this provides dynamic angles, adding a cinematic element to the combat. First-person shooting was available as well, and a great option for stealth since you could pull off headshots, along with being able to lean in and out of cover. Even to this day, the details this game has makes the action intense. For example, shooting enemies will leave blood on their clothes, and there's a vast arsenal of weapons to use. And if you've ever played Syphon Filter before, then you know that the very best weapon was and is the taser. From a design standpoint, Syphon Filter did a great job at delivering both more open and linear levels. For example, the first level has a set of objectives for you to complete, but the order in which you do them is completely up to the player. Some allow for options for both open and stealth combat, like in the park, and others do a great job of just making you feel like a spy in a Hollywood action film. Much of this comes down to the game's hands-off approach, to providing just enough guidance through environmental clues rather than hand-holding the player through the game. This means that the player needs to figure things out, thus creating a more rewarding experience. For example, I often like to sight when needing to get up to the upper level in the museum level. The elevator won't go up to the top floor, but the switch up top is malfunctioning, and after exploring the area and finding no means to go forward, I decided to come back here and shoot the switch. And when that took me to the top floor, it was extremely satisfying and created a fun event that you would probably see in a film, where sequences like this were peppered throughout the game. In the sequel, there were several. It felt like the developers thought up all the actions and dilemmas an action hero could go through, and provided them all, along with being able to deliver some impressive set pieces for the PS1. When people bring up train levels, many usually bring up the impressive sequence in Uncharted 2, and as a huge fan of Uncharted, this set of levels is an absolute blast to play through. But Syphon Filter 2 deserves some credit as well when it comes to great train levels. In Syphon 2, there is a fun sequence where you are jumping between cars firing away at enemies. It's a very simple level mechanically, but delivers a lot of great forward-moving action. Along with this are the problem-solving situations that stay with you. One of my favorites is when you need to rescue two fellow soldiers. They are being guarded by two henchmen. The dilemma is that if you kill one of them, then the other will immediately shoot the captives. But upon trying this a few times and observing the enemies, you'll notice that one guard is stationary and the other is patrolling. So I had an idea. What if I lined up a sniper shot to potentially hit both enemies at once? So I got out my sniper rifle and waited till the patrolling guard was in front of the stationary one and fired. When both enemies dropped, this was easily one of the coolest parts in the game. Like I said, there's something to be said with these great problem-solving situations. You don't see this type of stuff in modern game design. Now, it isn't that I don't like modern games. There's plenty of new stuff that comes out that I enjoy and love. But I miss design like this, where more was placed on the player, and as such, these parts stay with you more, and it allows the player to have more ownership of the experience. The developers put all the pieces in place to make the player feel smart, and by allowing room for the player to figure it out, there's a greater sense of satisfaction to the entire thing.
Hey, come here and take a look at this.
Geez, hot. Is this last month's issue?
Yup. I don't think anyone will miss this, do you?
Syphon Filter 2 was made just 1 year after the first, and it's impressive how much better the game is, and that's saying a lot since the first is amazing. Outside of the game being chock full of memorable gameplay sequences, the checkpoint system saw a much needed improvement, with it being more forgiving. Stealth was mostly regulated to their own levels this time, and while many featured instant fail parts, the sequences were still really enjoyable. One that I love is when you need to slip past a group of patrols, but both guards are on your left and right down this tunnel. You can try and run down and take them out, but it won't work. But there is a truck that goes through, and you need to time your run with it to stay hidden as you sneak past everyone. Again, a fun sequence where you can see it being in a spy film. Another thing to make note of is how the boss fights are really memorable here, with the last one being really fun to figure out since he cannot be killed through normal gunfire. I won't spoil it in this video. Sadly, the taser does take a back seat for most of the game, but when you get it back, it's like reuniting with an old friend. And if you really miss it, you can enter one of the cheats to get it whenever you want, because Syphon Filter has plenty of levels that are just fun to mess around in. Syphon Filter 1 and 2 are great games that may look old, but their design is timeless. I have a soft spot for this figuring it out type of design, where many modern games handhold the player, and almost too much in many cases. It's oddly refreshing to go back to have these less guided experiences today, and one that especially allows for room for the player to potentially get stuck for a bit, and then find their way to work their way through the current situation to find themselves again in another unique sequence. The mix of all-out action, stealth, and problem solving are the three pillars that make both of these games awesome experiences. If you haven't played them, then definitely give them a try. I love revisiting them. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you'd like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of my links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.